G2 have just won IEM Dallas 2024 with Stewie as a stand-in, and I am seeing people now on completely different sides of what on earth this means for G2. Some people are saying this proves that hooxi is useless. He's rubbish. He's not the man for the team. They were able to win without him. He's clearly doing nothing. While some people are saying that Stewie just brought the positive vibes. There was no pressure on them because they had a stand-in, and that just allowed them to sort of play all chill and play off the vibes and win because of that. Which one is it? Let's try and have a look and find out. Before that, though, I want to point out that I will be on the analyst desk for Blast 2024 Spring Finals. Here we go. Oh my god, that's so loud. Freya in goal. Where is he? There. Oh, there he is. In the center of defense. Okay, if you don't watch football, you've got to be a big, tall, strong man to play at center of defense. And so I don't know why they picked me to be put in that position. But hey, I'm going to be on the analyst desk. It should be a lot of fun. Make sure to check that out. Oh, also, one more thing before we get into it. Okay, you see my red nose? Okay, I'm going to have to point this out. This is what happens when you're in the UK and it's finally sunny for one day and you spend some time outside and then you realize that of course you're going to get sunburned because that's just what we do in the UK as soon as it's sunny. Okay, so you're just going to have to live with that. Hopefully that fixes itself before I'm on the broadcast. But anyway, let's get into some actual points now. And let's start with just looking at the result. A big win over Vitality in the final. You can see down at the stats here, hooxi. My god, this man is priceless right now for what he is. I think if you could pick one player to start your team, if you could steal anyone, it would be him. He's the youngest, best player, so you would just be able to keep him long term and just be able to have so much value out of this guy. And for Vitality, I mean, Zywoo was okay. Mezzy was actually way better than usual, but maybe a little fall off from Spinks. He's meant to be in lurky, very important positions. Maybe didn't play to his best. But really, the striking point here is that these stats are quite similar to what G2 had for the tournament. Nexa and Stewie were not putting up fragging numbers. Hunter was in the middle. Nico played pretty damn well. In fact, I would say very well for his positions. And hooxi was insane. You can see that here on the overall stats. However, the thing that is so interesting about this is if you compare these to their stats for the year. hooxi this year, 1.34 rating overall this year. That's basically the same he got at this event. Nico, 1.16 rating for this year. Slightly higher at this event, but basically the same. Hunter, 1.03 rating at this event. 1.00 rating for the year. Again, pretty goddamn similar. And then Nexa actually has a 0.95 rating for this year and only a 0.85 rating at this tournament. And then Stewie, who is in place of hooxi, 0.88 rating at this event, and hooxi had a 0.9 rating this year. So actually, the overall numbers there are similar or maybe even slightly worse at this Dallas event, fragging-wise for G2, and yet this is the event they were able to win. Stewie, comparing to hooxi this year, is literally not better in any of these stats. I'll flick back and forth through them. You can see, stats-wise, Stewie doesn't do anything actually better than hooxi here. However, clearly, Stewie did something right to make this team win, okay? Because I am seeing people come out and instantly say, oh, whatever, it's just a fluke, or, you know, Stewie didn't even play well. Listen, this guy wins. He just has been winning. He's been doing it for ages, and now he stands in and he wins again. Clearly, there's something going on here. And honestly, I'm very lucky I didn't come out with any predictions before this event, because I probably would have said that at this point, I don't know if Stewie's got the ability. I don't know if those intangibles will be enough. Well, clearly they were. I think the other thing to look at is, okay, so the player stats were the same, but what about the team stats? You know, maybe they were better at trading. Maybe they had better flashes. No, not really. Again, their Dallas stats, pretty similar to their stats for the year. Round win percent is like the same. Opening kill percent, pretty similar. They actually got way fewer multi-kills at Dallas than they have so far this year. When they've had a man advantage, the win percent basically the same. 4v5 win percent, basically the same. Traded percentage, amount of kills that are traded, actually slightly lower at this event. Utility damage, again, like very similar. Flash assists were slightly higher, but not enough to be a noticeable difference. They've always been pretty good at flash assists. So this is confusing people. And I wanted to look into, okay, how about we look at some previous stand-in success stories and try and see if we can gather something from those and see if that can help us work out what has gone on here. So the most obvious one, you're all going to know and love, JKS. And when he stood in a big 1.14 rating at the win for FaZe at Katowice, I will say, though, I think brokey had a better than average performance. Normally, Rops was the top fragger on this team. brokey stood out. Carrigan definitely did well in the playoffs as well. Twist played well. So you can kind of see that some of the other players maybe elevated a little in order to help get this win. And JKS played incredibly, right? Stats-wise. Snacks, you might not remember this one. Snacks standing in for Ents at Dallas a couple of years ago. He was actually their highest rated player. Now, they didn't win this. I think they came second in the end. But kind of goes to show that these stats are pretty mediocre for the whole team. And yet, stand-in was able to do well. Okay, that's good to know. Now, this one, Nothing, playing for Mouse in 2018. I think this one is easily the most comparable to this Stewie stand-in situation. Because Nothing was on the tail end of his career. You can see he'd just been left from Cloud9. He hadn't played an event in 2018. He goes to Belo Horizonte with Mouse. He actually doesn't really play much CS after this, in all fairness. And his stats at this event, again, they're okay. They're slightly better than Stewie's. For a stand-in, I think this is like fine. This is what you'd expect. But the team, again, just had some pretty big performances you wouldn't expect from Chris J and Sunny. And I don't know if that's comparable to this G2 run, because you got the same levels out of these players, and yet they were able to win with the stand-in. So it is very confusing on that front. And then you also have Croman, someone who stood in for FaZe for a little bit, played really well. They actually won this Horizonte event. And then finally, Nato Safix at CS Summit. Not a stadium event. Again, not a massive event. But he stood in and was able to win with Carrigan. Again, Carrigan, the king of stand-ins. And I do think something else worth looking at for this tournament, because we've seen that stand-ins can win just based off of vibes. If I search for Dallas 2024, I think it's worth looking at some of the other teams. Because, for example, 9Z making it into the semi-finals, interesting. That can maybe already throw some curveballs in there and say, okay, maybe some teams aren't at their best if that happened. Mouse finishing 9th to 12th. That's a big one for me, because Mouse had been very good leading into this event, and they basically said they'd been grinding a few too many events leading into this one. So that's already one of the big teams going out kind of early, and that loss against 9Z was really the killer, because then they end up going out actually against G2. I do think, though, teams like Vitality, teams like FaZe, I don't think you can really argue with those wins for G2. So let's get into some chat about this. We've seen that stand-ins can do well in the past. We've seen it happen. Sometimes, for whatever reason, a stand-in will come in and a team will win. So where do I sit on this? I think it proves a couple of things. Firstly, it proves that G2 have the talent to win tournaments. It's something I think we should have known, but I've got to put it out there. I have to just say it. It proves that G2 have the firepower to win tournaments and win against good teams. For me, though, I don't know if this changes anything that I already knew about G2. The weird thing is, a lot of people seem quite confused by this win. I don't think I'm like that shocked by it. We always have known that G2 are a team who can show up and win tournaments. The thing that's maybe surprising about this one is that in the past, it's been someone like Hunter stepping up or someone like Nico playing unbelievably well that's allowed them to win tournaments. In the past, there have been statistical differences where you see a player is just playing at an elite level. Whereas at this one, the stats were the same. But let's be real, we've known that G2 are this team where if all the pieces come together, they can win tournaments. But that doesn't happen that often. And I think that's just what this team are. They're a team who seem to just rely on giving a bit of freedom to those individuals, letting those individuals play well. And therefore, I actually do think the mood of the team is going to be very important for a team like G2. And that is probably why bringing someone like Stewie in, who clearly got on well with the guys and clearly brings those intangibles that we don't always get to see. We don't always get to see the comms, but he keeps the level up. He's clearly knowing that he's come in here and saying, you know what? I'm just going to do whatever to win this because I want to prove I can still be on a team that competes very well. And by the way, can we give credit to Stewie? Because it would have been quite easy for Stewie to come in here and say, you know what? I don't know if this team will go far. How about I just play for some good stats so that I can try and prove to a team, hey, look, I got this good rating at Dallas. Pick me up. He doesn't do that. He realizes, actually, if I do my bit for the team and we go far, people will notice me because we've gone far. And we'll see what happens to Stewie. Listen, we saw previously there, nothing when he stood in for Mouse. He didn't really go on to play for a massive team after. He played for Complexity for a bit. But Stewie's at least put himself back on the map, and he wasn't even on the map before this. So, fair play to Stewie. I've got to give him a lot of props. I wasn't sure he was going to be able to do it. Really cool for him, honestly. Cool to see the eyes back on him. But I do think the main thing to take away here is we already knew that G2 are a team where, when everything feels right, they can win tournaments. And I think bringing in a stand-in for one event can make everything feel right. It feels novel. It feels fun. It feels like, screw it, let's just do what we want. Play with freedom. Now, if they kept Stewie for like 6 months, I think that novelty wears away, and you probably don't see them winning tournaments again. That's nothing against Stewie. I think he'd agree with me. I think he knows he's not going to come in and Nico's going to in-game lead and they just win tournaments. But I also think, if anything, this proves to me that I still think hooxi makes sense on this team. And I know that's maybe going to shock some people. And I still don't think hooxi is like a great in-game leader. And that is the frustrating thing. But I also think it's tough to know where you would go. And you need to find like a really good fit for this team. Because in-game leading is a role where you are putting way more time in than everyone else. You are anti-stratting. You are coming up with ideas. And so naturally, in-game leaders want to be very hands-on a lot of the time. They want to be controlling everything. They want to be saying to players what they should and shouldn't do. And sometimes they will give some freedom, but overall, they want to be the boss because they know it's their arse on the line. If they have these great players and they don't perform well, they're going to be the first on the chopping block. If you're an in-game leader, you are the one to blame. And so if you feel like you haven't had that full control and you haven't even come up with your ideas or your system, you're going to be pissed when you get kicked from that team. I think hooxi is a rare in-game leader where I'm going to give him a lot of credit for this. I think he actually has the awareness and humility to realize on this team, if he tries to tell Nico to play a super structured round all the time, the entire half, if he tries to tell m0NESY, you've just got to hold this angle, it's just not going to work. They're not going to listen to you. I don't think they want to play like that. And sometimes you've got to sit there and say, okay, fair play. I don't think we should play some mad structured system because it doesn't suit these players. And I actually give a lot of credit to hooxi for that realization because the other thing is, I think a lot of people just assume that hooxi is a very loose in-game leader. I don't know if that's actually true. I think when he was on Copenhagen Flames, he called for a much more structured system with that team because he realized he probably didn't have quite the same level of talent. I think if you put hooxi down onto a lower level Danish team today, he would play with way more structure. I think he can do that. But I actually think he's joined G2 and realized, listen, I can't just come in here and tell Nico, throw nades all the time and go for this super structured play. Sometimes I've got to say, Nico, work a pick on Banana and we'll see where we go from there. And then it's hooxi's job to sort of guide the ship in the right direction from that point. And the thing is, as much as I don't think hooxi is a top in-game leader, and as much as I don't think they're going to consistently win trophies with hooxi, if you're recruiting for a replacement, you have to make sure it fits the team. And I'm struggling to think of in-game leaders that can be so willing to accommodate players. I mean, I guess Carrigan's one of the obvious ones. But it's tough outside of him, and I don't think you're getting him. And I think the perfect point to illustrate this is Cadian and Liquid. Cadian was so highly touted as a fantastic in-game leader, playing on Heroic, playing this really cool system where it's all team play, it's so active, it's so cool to see them constantly move around the map, and it just feels like all 5 players are working together, 5 fingers on a hand, turn into a glove, punch you in the face randomly, and you just don't know what's hit you. But then Cadian comes to Liquid. It is completely different players who want to play their own style, who want to play their own way. And I think that's the key thing. If you have players who have a certain style that is not going to fit in within that system, it is not going to work. You're not going to be able to come in and say, hey, Twist, I need you to do more of this. Hey, Naf, I need you to do more of this. Twist joined Liquid so that he could play in a different way from FaZe. That's the main reason he came, is because he wanted different roles. Naf, we know what Naf is going to play like. You can't make him suddenly be more active or join the pack more. I don't want Naf to. I mean, he kind of has changed his role a bit, and I still don't know if I like it. So I think that's the main takeaway, is you look at someone like Cadian joining Liquid and you say, okay, let's say I brought a more structured guy onto this team, onto this G2 team. Would that work? It's tough, because I don't know if Nico or m0NESY would want to do that. Even Hunter is someone who I think wants a lot of autonomy. And when you have these players that have got so used to, I will say, their style, or know their style so well, they know how they want to play so well, it's going to be hard to find an in-game leader to come in and say, hey, I want to change things. I want to do things my way. The only way I think you could do it is if you brought in an in-game leader and a coach. But then, if you're G2, do you really want to run the risk of pissing off m0NESY, pissing off Nico? It's a tough position to be in. So unless I can think of a better option, which I don't think I can, I totally understand why hooxi's on this team. And I think hooxi will do similar to what he's done. I'm sure they'll win another tournament with hooxi at some point if they keep him. It just will happen. The question is, how willing are these players to maybe be slightly more willing to change their playstyle, if that makes sense? And that's a big question. And I think the only way to know that would be to bring in another in-game leader. But you would be walking such a tightrope. And again, who am I to say, Nico, sorry, you can't entry Banana this round. I've got a different idea. The problem is, Nico can just win maps by himself entering Banana. It does feel a bit silly to put these players on a leash, right? When they have this individual ability that's been proven by the way they can win with standards. So it is a very interesting one. It is very interesting. I think for hooxi, I mean, listen, I understand that the community are probably going to be largely thinking that he's not been doing enough to help this team win tournaments now, based on them winning with Stewie. But I think this is just an unfortunate scenario where you actually look bad because the team gets in a really good mood and gets to flow. And this team, I would say, is probably the best in the world at just like, if any day you'd have to play with a stand-in and just loosen up and have individuals carry, this team might be the best in the world for that. They might just be. And so you realize, because of what hooxi's doing already, because of the style of this team, it makes sense that they do well with a stand-in. But it also kind of makes hooxi look like he's less useful than I think he actually is. I will say, a final note, the one area of hooxi's game where I would like to maybe see him improve as an in-game leader, and I think it's very hard to do, but it is in those scenarios where maybe you've given someone the opportunity to try and open up a round. Sometimes I do feel like G2 can get a little lost in what they're doing towards the end of a round. If you give someone a bit of freedom and they go for a move, hooxi needs to always be on it and always have a backup plan and say, okay, we can do this, and this can at least get us into a decent post plant. This can at least get us into a decent position. Because the other side of the coin is, your players are so good that as long as you can get them into post plants consistently, they're also just going to win those randomly. So I think it's all about that balance, striking that balance. And it's why I think the most important skill for an in-game leader of G2 is being willing to let the players play their own way and have freedom, while also being able to have plans ready on the fly in case those opening moves go wrong, to salvage the round, to put the team in a decent position. Curious your guys' thoughts on this. I feel like I've been much more positive than normal, because in the past, I have been a bit against hooxi, but I am starting to come round to the fact that if they win tournaments, listen, I think it's hard to find an in-game leader that has some of the qualities that hooxi has. I really do. And that's the main takeaway here. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Excited for more Counter-Strike to come. I'll catch you next time.